Hello everybody and welcome to Blue Jays Today. We're your boys. We always got something to say about the Toronto Blue Jays. I'm your host, Adam Peddle.
And I'm your host, Nicholas Playlog. And today, guys, we're going to be talking about a little bit of a surprising Toronto Blue Jays trade rumor. The Blue Jays, they are involved in a lot of trades right now going on. So much speculation. But one name that just recently came up is George Springer, somebody who I think a lot of people kind of anticipated is going to be a staple on these Toronto Blue Jays for a long period of time, and now maybe that's not necessarily the case. So a lot of that to break down here. Is that something to be believed? Where George Springer could get traded if it was to happen, and more. Please make sure to like, subscribe, comment your thoughts down below. So much more content on the way. So first things first, dude, let's go to this initial report that's kind of outlining how or why or where this whole Springer trade rumor got started from.
Yeah, right over here we have Jeff Blair coming out and saying this, which really sparked it, saying something I've heard in the last week is that while it's far from a priority, the Jays might try to get out from under George Springer's deal as part of their off-season work. He also has an 18 no trade clause. And if you all remember, just as a little bit of a refresher, George Springer, he's on the books for the Toronto Blue Jays for another 3 years. 24 mil, 24 mil, 24 mil. Yeah. That is the highest paid Blue Jay as of right now. And if you look at his last few years, it hasn't been that good. It's been a steady decline ever since joining the Toronto Blue Jays. If you just look at the OPS and even the power numbers, right? So yeah, I mean, in an ideal world, it makes sense to not want to pay 24 mil for the next 3 years for a guy that looks like he's kind of falling into the back half of his career. But that also brings up a lot of questions. Who else would want a guy who basically playing $72 million for the next 3 years for a guy declining?
100%, dude. And I think that the scariest thing about George Springer and why other teams would be worried about taking on that money if the Toronto Blue Jays were to try to get out of the contract is the fact that he was fully healthy last year, right? There's no injury to fall back on. There's no, oh, it's COVID year. There's no, oh, well, this is the first year with his new team. Like, there really is no excuse as to why George Springer wasn't good last year, and he just wasn't what he used to be. You know, he was still hitting for a decent average, but the on-base was lower and the slugging was way lower. And we see this time and time again as players age, the power numbers, they go down, and that's really bad for George Springer because that's kind of always what he's been known for. It's Springer dingers, you know, like that is his calling card. And if you're losing the Springer dinger, the value starts to dip quite a bit. Yeah,
I agree. And when you look at where the Blue Jays are trying to go with their future, you are hoping to have a little bit of Springer dinger action into his mid-30s. He's 34 coming into his year. So, you know, it might be tipping away. But again, we could be just talking right now and he could bounce back next year. But
Renaissance season, it could always happen.
And that's why it's not a priority right now to be dumping George Springer's contract because you're still on books for another 3 years, right? But if it does come around to it and you're going, okay, we've made all the deals, we advanced our team, we made the free agent signings, we made some trades. Well, is there a George Springer reality where he does get traded to kind of offload his contract? Is there a reality right now where that could be a possibility?
Let's take a look at the trades the Toronto Blue Jays have been rumored to be in on.
Time for a quick shout out to Betway. Betway is the best place to make all of your sports bets on all of your favorite teams. Betway is also in collaboration with iGaming Ontario. Must be 19 years or older to participate. And guys, please bet responsibly. Now, back to the content.
So obviously, there's Juan Soto, right? They have been linked to Juan Soto a crap load over the last 72 hours, right? It came from Hector Gomez saying that they could be favorites to land Juan Soto. This is all after the Yankees started falling out of the race. And Juan Soto, you know, if we just look at it on, you know, a one-for-one basis right here, well, it's like, well, if you trade away Juan Soto, or if you trade away George Springer, excuse me, Juan Soto now comes in and he fills in that role, right? And he's like young George Springer hitting and being phenomenal. But we got to factor in, from the Padres standpoint, the whole reason that they're trading Juan Soto is to save money. So I don't really think it makes a whole lot of sense in the Padres standpoint to be taking on an older guy who is way worse than Juan Soto for way more money.
Yeah, no, that's just a not fit right there. There's no way in any reality you're going to see George Springer in a Padres uniform next year at all.
Unless we took on a bunch of the contract, in which case that doesn't even make
sense because because you're trading for Juan Soto. You got 1 year of Juan Soto, and yeah, sure, 3 years of George Springer. I'd rather have 1 year of Juan Soto, but still, you might as well get an everyday player, and that's what you're going to get from George Springer at the top of your lineup. So it just really doesn't make sense to be spending all this money for this. So in another trade kind of rumor, you did hear a few days ago that apparently the Blue Jays were interested in a Isaiah Paredes. Now he's got 4 years left on that contract. It would look really nice, but here's the thing, he's going to cost a lot, just like Juan Soto, and adding George Springer on as well, that's going to be a lot lesser of a trade value. You're going to have to add even more, plus same situation. Not that, like, you know, the Padres had to borrow money to spend for all the guys. These guys don't even have any money.
Yeah.
So to say, hey, here's $24 million to sit right next to your other $25 million player and Tyler Glass, that makes zero sense. So you're not going to see that deal either.
No, because realistically, guys, if they're trading away George Springer, the only reason that they're trading away is to save money so that then they can go and they can sign somebody else. And for those two examples right there with the Padres or with the Rays, you would have to pay the Padres, you'd have to pay the Rays, probably like at least 3/4 of George Springer's contract just to give away George Springer, and that just does not make sense, right? You'd rather have that value on your team. So it's really interesting to me that Jeff Blair is coming out and saying that he has heard over the last little bit that this is something that they might consider, they might do, because right now the current teams that they're being rumored to trading with, they wouldn't take them, and that kind of opens the door for a bunch of other squads where it's like, okay, are we talking with these guys but potentially shipping off George Springer and them taking on some of the contract? And who are we getting if that's the case, right? What are we doing with our outfield if George Springer is not a part of it?
Like, I see the situation being like this. You got to find a team that's looking to probably retool, right? I don't think this is a year to do a George Springer kind of, you know, contract dump with 3 years left. It just doesn't make a lot of sense for me. I think if you are going to trade him, you send him to a team that is trying to retool, but you also need guys to replace George Springer in that outfield. Like, obviously trading for Juan Soto would be a great example.
Yes.
But right now, all you have is Dalton Varsho and George Springer. Left field's going to be right now it's a utility kind of spot.
Yeah, until you get someone else, we don't know who's
exactly. And right now, you're looking like if you get Juan Soto and the other guys you possibly could get, like Jock Pederson and Michael Brantley, these are all 1 year rentals. So this really isn't a sustainable long-term solution, and you're just going to be rotating one year guys in there. So right now, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless, in other kind of speculations we talked about on this channel, unless you're willing to sign like a Cody Bellinger, bringing him over, okay, you have Varsho for 2 more years, you have Bellinger here for, God, who knows, 8 years, whatever his deal might look like. And then maybe I'm okay with maybe trading George Springer away. But again, you got to find the suitor. And right now, I don't know how many suitors are out there for.
I was just going to ask you, man, do you think that there is anyone out there that would be willing to take on that full contract for 3 years of George Springer? Because the more that we're talking about it right now, and the fact that he is going to be 34, and there has been an injury history, and the fact that even though he was fully healthy last year and then the power was down, it's just kind of like a whole scenario right now where it's not necessarily the guy that you want to be buying in on. If this was after his previous season where he put up an 800 OPS, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But I'm finding it hard to believe that in any scenario right now, you're able to dump 3/4 of that contract. Like, I feel like you need to take most of it.
That's why this is not the year to do it. Like, I could see a reality where the Blue Jays might do it if they have replacements again, maybe with 2 years left on his deal. Maybe someone's, okay, $50 million, that's a little bit less money. Maybe we want a guy, and if George comes out next year, does a little bit better, his OPS goes back up kind of closer to 800, maybe even 800 again. But then again, you're in a situation, why would you trade him? Unless there's someone so like dying to take his rollover, and the Blue Jays really believe in that said player, there's no reason to even make that trade.
Yeah, and right now, from a Jays perspective, like, don't get me wrong, I would love to dump the money, but if you can't dump the full contract and you're still going to be taking on half of it or even more than half of it, or in a situation where you'd have to give up prospects to give up George Springer and make them take the contract, it just doesn't make sense, right? Because again, as we started this video saying, he had a bad year last year, but that doesn't mean that he can't necessarily bounce back again, right? We've seen time and time again, these older veterans, sure, sometimes it's a steady decline, but hell, I mean, do you remember Nelson Cruz mashing like 40-plus home runs when the guy was literally 40, right? It is not impossible for players to come and to bounce back. So I feel like George Springer is a prime bounce-back candidate. And even though Jeff Blair is saying that, yes, they are exploring that because they're going to talk about it, I don't know if it makes sense this offseason.
I think that conversation was probably, hey, wouldn't it be nice to get rid of George Springer's contract?
That'd be nice.
Because, damn, we're looking at our payroll and like, yeah, this contract here is not looking good.
Yeah.
That's probably what the conversation was like. And then they went, who would take him? Nobody. Okay, that was it.
Yeah,
that's it, guys.
Agreed. Folks, let us know your thoughts about this in the comments down below. Do you think that there's any legs to this George Springer trade rumors? You know, the trades with Juan Soto as well and Isaac Paredes. What is the package going to look like? We want to hear your thoughts down below.
Yeah, and guys, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and $3 a month to become a Patreon member. Shout out and thank you to all of our current Patreon members. You guys are awesome. And our YouTube members, you guys are also freaking awesome.
Thank you so much for watching.
And go Jays go!